Tonight, defiance from President Biden amid concerns about his health. Questions from the briefing room today on if the president has Parkinson's. The White House refusing to identify a Parkinson's specialist who became a frequent visitor.
Guys, I'm just not going to do that out of security reasons, out of privacy. It is not something that I'm going to do. A measure of privacy.
A live look now at Capitol Hill as the president told Democratic lawmakers today to stand down. But the highest-ranking Democrat to date is now saying, sorry, Mr. President. Plus, did Donald Trump's vice presidential list just narrow? The two who went before the cameras as a big decision looms. Melania Trump out fundraising at this hour. Are we about to see more of her? And Congress this week focusing on your dishwasher. Why this is now bubbling up once again. Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. And hello, good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. The scene today, Washington, of a surreal moment at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, a couple of them. President Biden starting the week with a two-page letter trying to rebuff Democrats who have called on him to leave the presidential race. He then took a page out of Donald Trump's playbook, calling into his favorite morning show to vent. President Biden reiterating he will not bow out and issued this challenge.
I'm getting so frustrated by the elites. Now, I'm not talking about you guys, but about the elites in the party who they know so much more. But if any of these guys don't think I should run against me, go ahead, announce for president. Challenge me at the convention.
Challenge me at the convention, he says. Then later in the day, hours later at the White House, reporters asking why a Parkinson's disease specialist visited the White House at least 8 times since last August. The press secretary reiterated a wide range of service members get treated at the White House, but refused to even confirm the presence of Dr. Kevin Kennard on White House grounds. She said the president has had 3 neurological exams. This right here, what you're about to watch, just part of the lengthy back and forth about the health of the commander-in-chief.
Has the president been treated for Parkinson's? No. Is he being treated for Parkinson's? No, he's not. Is he taking medication for Parkinson's? No.
So far, 6 House Democrats have called on the president to leave the race. Congressman Adam Smith, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, now says the commander-in-chief should stop his candidacy. NewsNation has told another 3 higher-ranking committee members, just like Smith, are about to do the same. But this evening, a president dug in as the White House dodges legitimate questions about the health of the commander-in-chief. Joining us now here on the Hill is the Democratic Congresswoman from the state of Ohio. She represents the Cleveland area, Shontel Brown. Congresswoman, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate the time. President Biden, as you see it, Congresswoman, should he continue his campaign, yes or no?
I am standing solidly with President Biden. He has been a magnificent president, and I am confident he will go down in history as one of the greatest presidents in our lifetime. Listen, I think this press secretary was very clear in her position as it relates to questions around his health. And what I think is more important is the questions that haven't come up as it relates to his challenger, a person who has been known to tell 30.
Yeah, no. We'll get there. We'll get there with Donald Trump, and I understand why Democrats want to talk about him, but there are very real questions about the sitting commander-in-chief. You said this
answered very thoroughly by the press secretary during that press conference, and so
you were pleased with the press secretary?
What was frustrating for my constituents back home is why no one is talking about the challenger who was allowed to stand on stage and lie over 30 times. And if you calculate 30 times and you calculate the number of questions that were asked and the time that the president had to respond, that means that Donald Trump lied every single time that he opened his mouth. So if we're going to question somebody's health and mental acuity, I think that the question needs to be pointed towards Donald Trump. This is also a person who has been known to stand a campaign campaign rallies and talk about being electrocuted on a boat or eaten by a shark. Which would you choose? Now, this is not the person that I want in control of the country. And so that is more fearful to me than anything that President Biden could do or could be undergoing. Not to mention the fact that Project 2025, which no one seems to be talking about.
Congresswoman, so let me jump in here for a second, because you are a businesswoman. Before you got into politics, you're a businesswoman, and now you're a member of Congress. You have a staff, right? So whether in the private sector with your business or now as a member of Congress with your staff, you have people who work for you. And we know that when the president spoke to governors last week at the White House, he told them, Congresswoman, that he needs to sleep more and work less. If a member of your staff said to you, you know what, Congresswoman Brown, I got to sleep more and work less, you'd fire them, wouldn't you? Or you'd start looking for their replacement, would you not?
Absolutely not. Listen, the fact that the president can admit his shortcomings, I think, is a blessing. I think it demonstrates his integrity. I think it demonstrates his authenticity. And I think it demonstrates how genuine he is when it comes to telling the truth. The man on the other side has no relationship with the truth, unable to do such a thing. And so that is the thing, again, that concerns me more than what you're talking about as it relates to President Biden. We need to shift the focus back to what's more important. A performance or somebody who can deliver policy? Do you want a great debater or a great deliverer? Because President Biden has been a great deliverer when it comes to this country. He has delivered the bipartisan infrastructure law, which also has created a $1 trillion job.
I hear you. You're great.
That will get jobs that do not require a 4-year degree. What Donald Trump
are a great spokesperson for. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Question or not?
Well, I want to end with this, because I hear you touting the president's agenda, right? And obviously you are for the president. We hear you.
Facts. You're asking me questions, and I am touting facts. This is
let me ask you about comments.
Solely the president's agenda, but it is, because the fact of the matter is we need to be focused on what the vision for the future is. And Project 2025 is a clear vision of damage, destruction, divisiveness when it comes to our democracy. And for former President Trump to pretend as if he has no knowledge of Project 2025 is absolutely absurd. The person who is the architect and the author of Project 2025 is being considered.
I hear you, Congresswoman. And I hate to. I'm trying not to jump in on you, but I want to ask you. I want to leave you with this, because we are talking about Donald Trump here on the show, but I'm here to talk to you about President Biden. You said earlier this year, Congresswoman, at the State of the Union, after the State of the Union, that President Biden, in your words, quote, was clear, candid, and convincing. As it stands today, you believe that President Biden is clear, candid, and convincing.
100%.
All right, we'll leave it there. Congresswoman Shontel Brown, State of Ohio, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to the panel. Joining me throughout the hour here on the Hill, Ashley Davis, former George W. Bush White House official. Scott Bolden, NewsNation political analyst, NewsNation contributor, former chairman of the D.C. Democratic Party. Sarah McCammon, national correspondent for NPR. And look who's here, Kelly Meyer, NewsNation Washington correspondent. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. Scott, you heard that from a member of your party, and do you think that is connected to reality?
Well, she's got all the arguments to talk.
She has the arguments, and I promise you we're going to talk about Donald Trump, but is that connected?
I felt like you needed a criminal defense lawyer because you were not the enemy. I don't think you got more than one or two questions in and she wouldn't stop talking.
Well, I mean, the question of...
Those are all the talking points.
Would you hire someone who says they need to sleep more and work less? And she said yes. I mean,
okay. So at my law firm, no.
You wouldn't do that?
No, we wouldn't, because we're about billable hours. But those talking points are salient, but Biden drives this negative narrative. But for his performance, we'd be talking about the campaign and not about his mental acuity or his capability of staying in the race. Now, we've had about 10 days of it. I think we've only got about one more week to go before something else happens. That is, the donors all walk en masse, the DNC or the Dems figure out what to do, or they're going to coalesce behind or around Trump. Behind Biden, rather, and keep it and move forward and let the chips fall where they may.
Do you think... Can I just ask a question?
Go for it.
How do you think that the divide is brokered between the two groups within the party now? Obviously, she is a perfect example of someone that's bought in, but then you have a lot of
fully bought in.
Yeah.
I'd hire someone who wants to sleep more and work less.
And then you have donors that are bailing out. You have other members of Congress. I just feel like there's going to be a lot of
be the majority?
Bad blood, right?
When do we get to the point where the majority of Democratic donors, I include myself, the voters, elected officials, remember, you got those down ballot elections too.
Oh, yeah.
There's got to be a majority or groundswell of something. Because remember, he's got to release those delegates, and if he doesn't, you're looking at a convention fight, and you got to convince his delegates at the convention in Chicago to vote for someone else. There's also an underlying dynamic here in regard, especially with black and brown voters and women voters, because the most logical choice, if he steps away, is Kamala Harris, who is super popular with the Democratic base, which we've been leaking. She could solve a lot of those issues.
And that would have been interesting to ask her, too. Would she have wanted?
I think I just would have heard Project 2025. Donald Trump. Again, all relevant, real questions. By the way, I would love to know what a second Biden term looks like, and we could talk about both terms, but I want to tee up the Karine Jean-Pierre soundbite if we can, because you've been in the White House briefing room. Yeah. I spent years in the White House briefing room. I'm not sure, Kelly, that clearly in this administration, I had ever seen sort of the pushback against the president, against the press secretary today. I'll get your reaction on the other side. Here's Karine Jean-Pierre.
Guys, hold on a second. There's no reason to go back and forth and be in this aggressive way.
Missed around here about how information's been shared with the press corps about here.
What do you missed about? What do you missed about?
Everything he just.
It was hot outside, but it was hotter in that briefing room. It was getting heated. It was tense, and you could sense the frustration from reporters in there, because over the past week since the debate, there's been back and forth, and we've been talking about it on the Hill. There's been one thing that she said, and the president that night says something else. One thing she said, the president says something else. So they just wanted to get it straight. We just want to get it straight.
Right, of course. Yeah.
All we want to know, because we want to inform our viewers and our listeners, who came to the White House? Did they see the doctor? She was saying that she didn't want to share it because of what you were saying earlier, that there were other people that go and see this doctor. But we didn't care about the other people. You don't have to reveal that. We just want to know, did the president see this doctor?
He's one of one. The other people, you shove them to the side, Sarah. He's one of one.
I think the issue, the congresswoman wanted to talk about former President Trump, his record, his felony conviction.
Don't blame her.
But this is the reason that the Democrats see so much as being at stake, and in many ways why they're divided right now, because they all agree they don't want Trump to be reelected, but they don't agree on whether or not Biden is up to the task.
Right. As a Republican, right, this is what you want, right? Like, the Congresswoman was right to say, let's talk about Donald Trump. But this is the focus right now, and for the first time he gets to sit back and watch the circus.
And no one, exactly, which is very unusual in the Trump world, especially with all the court cases that were happening. But I also think that even the immunity ruling last week by the Supreme Court kind of was like a 48-hour story.
It was, below the fold.
So, sorry, I was just going to say, I was thinking normally on Capitol Hill when we're chasing down the Republicans to get their response to something Trump said. And now this is the first time, I think, in the Biden administration that we've seen, reporters running up to Democrats to say, where do you stand on this issue? Which is really interesting.
It's flipped a bit. All right, joining us now, Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation political contributor as well. Mick, great to see you as always. Nice to speak with you, sir. I want your take on what we saw out of the briefing room today. You've watched hundreds, if not thousands, of these things just like I have. And for Karine Jean-Pierre to say, we're not going to reveal, essentially, if this Parkinson's specialist from Walter Reed was on campus grounds when we know he was on campus grounds from the visitor logs. I wonder if you believe that she was right in making that argument, or if you just set all of that aside because he's the president.
Yeah, Kelly made an excellent point. What she started talking about is when Karine Jean-Pierre says one thing in the morning and the president says something the exact opposite or different or inconsistent later that afternoon, and that happens again and again. That is a giant problem. The press has to be able to rely on the press secretary for accurate information. There's sort of an unspoken balance there. There's a great deal of respect between the entities and so forth, but you can't lie to them, right? You can't lie to the press. And if you do, if they feel like you are, they're going to get really, really upset. By the way, I'll make a small suggestion to Kelly as a way to get around this issue. She's right not to say, stuff about the KJP's right not to say stuff about the president's health and so forth. I get that. You've asked the other questions about, is there other people he's seeing? Here's a question I haven't heard asked yet. Did anybody in the White House notify the vice president or any members of the cabinet, or specifically the Speaker of the House? If there's ever a concern about the ability of the president, then it's incumbent actually on the chief of staff to notify the Speaker of the House. So that's probably worth asking that question as a follow-up.
Good question.
So Mick, put on your chief of staff hat, because you have called this a White House on fire. Where do you think they're going tonight? Where do you think they're going tomorrow?
I don't think they have any idea. I think right now they sort of have to follow the president, right? The president came out today and was defiant that he's going to continue to play this role. I'm not sure how you manage that defiance. And look, if it was only social media calling for him to step down, you can be defiant. But you're talking now about Democrat leaders, donors, the New York Times, for goodness sake. I don't know how you can be defiant in the face of that.
Adam Smith, who's been on this show a bunch, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, telling the Commander-in-Chief it's time. Mick, thank you, sir. We'll see you on the other side of the break for Hot Mic with Mick. I wonder, Mick, if we were just sort of given a tell on who Donald Trump is considering for his vice president, why Melania Trump is back out on the campaign trail. I'll see you soon in a few minutes with what you're hearing, what you're thinking. See you in a couple. But first, a live look at Congress. Of all the things that they have on their plate before them, it also includes your dishwasher. Yes, your dishwasher. Why Congress has taken up what you have in your kitchen. When The Hill on NewsNation returns. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation as President Biden defiantly stays in the presidential race. Former President Donald Trump is mostly staying silent, but a big announcement expected about his running mate could come before, or at least should come before next week at the Republican National Convention. Now, two candidates at the center of the speculation are the Republican Senators J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, as both appeared on Sunday shows yesterday. Come on in, Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, Budget Director, Congressman as well, here to tell us what he's hearing, what he's thinking. All right, Mulvaney, so I saw this. It's the Sunday before the Republican National Convention, and look who's out there. Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance. Not coincidental, is it, Mick? And I wonder if you think those are the final two.
No, I don't. Yes and no, but not because of the programs, right? Keep in mind how those Sunday shows get booked. It's not like Marco Rubio calls up and says, can I go on your program? I mean, you can, but they'd laugh at you. And certainly Donald Trump isn't going to call CNN and say, please put J.D. Vance on this week. That's not going to go over very well. These shows book their own guests. So my guess is they've seen the same lists that we've seen of J.D. Vance, Doug Burgum. Where was Doug Burgum this weekend, if that's the case? And Marco is being on the short list, so those networks reached out to them. So I wouldn't read too much into it. The stuff that I pay attention to is the stuff that's coming out of Bedminster that says that Trump is talking about those three, the big three, but every now and then he'll throw a curveball and ask again about somebody like Ben Carson or Tim Scott. That sounds more like Donald Trump to me.
Is that your then final five?
You know, we've been here for a while now. I'm still a Ben Carson fan because he fits that one category that I don't think anybody else does. He doesn't want to run for president. And I don't think Donald Trump wants a vice president who hits the ground running in 2028.
So they both were asked about retribution, right? In comments that Donald Trump has made about retribution. I told the Congresswoman we would talk about it. Here we are with Donald Trump. Here's the way J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio both answered that potential. Watch, I'll get your reaction on the other side.
So I think Donald Trump saying, look, let's do the basic work of investigating wrongdoing is a totally reasonable thing for him to do. And frankly, the Biden administration has done far worse.
Donald Trump has been the one that's been very clear that his vengeance is going to be by winning and making America great again, not going after his political opponents.
So if you're Donald Trump and you're listening to that, which I'm sure you are, which answer do you think he likes better?
Oh, they're both good answers. Keep in mind, I think they speak to different audiences. The J.D. Vance line is for the base. Look, we're just going to do to them what they did to us. That's fine. That was the piece I wrote in The Hill a couple weeks back. What's wrong with a little revenge and using the same standards, to the Democrats that they've used on Republicans? That's one answer. Marco's answer was to more of an independent down the middle voter, which is, look, there's not going to be any vengeance here. His revenge is going to be winning. Both of those things are true. Trump has said both of those things. Again, it's not unusual for politicians to say different things to different groups of people. So I thought they were both good answers, but speaking to a different target audience.
All right, Mick. Happening right now, by the way, the former First Lady Melania Trump hosting a fundraiser for the largest group of LGBTQ conservatives called the Log Cabin Republicans. This is happening in New York at Trump Tower. Melania raising money. She's spoken to this group before. What do you make of it? And are we going to see more of her?
Yeah, Ashley said something really interesting in the last segment about Trump sort of sitting back. I see this as part and parcel of a larger sitting back sort of campaign, a passive campaign. I know that sounds strange for Donald Trump, but hear me out. He saw what happened at the debate. I think I saw him during the debate sort of dial things back and realize that Joe Biden wasn't doing very well, so he immediately changed gears, and he stayed in that low gear. He got pushback over the weekend about Project 2025. What did he do? Say, well, people might not like that. I'm backing away from that. He gets questions about why Melania isn't out on the campaign helping him. Well, now she is. So it's sort of like he's taking away all the reasons to talk about him right now so that he can keep focus on Joe Biden. I happen to think if that's the plan, it's genius.
Hot Mike with Mick.
Do we have time for a question or no?
You can ask him one, yeah.
Okay, Mick. So here's my new theory percolating in my head. So if Kamala's the candidate and she has another young vice president, so there's a woman candidate for the Democrats, obviously very popular. That would be popular to women, suburban women, and then you have a younger Midwest VP. I'm just making it up. Do you think, since we have a week left supposedly until Trump announces his vice president on the 15th, which is what I'm kind of hearing, who knows if it's true or not, that he makes a change from a Ben Carson who's kind of on the older side and two men, or do you think it changes the dynamic?
You're basically saying, do you think he chooses a woman?
A woman or someone younger?
No.
I mean, JD and Rubio fit that.
And are you also asking if he might make one announcement at the convention next week and then change it if they don't buy that?
That's possible.
That's
I think
to
you'd
me.
have to read the tea leaves before next Monday. I still don't think he knows.
Is his decision shaped by what he thinks?
Yeah.
Mick, I'll give you a last word here.
Ashley, I don't think he knows. Ashley's exactly right. He's waiting as long as he possibly can to see what happens because that's the way the man operates. He's the best at it I've ever seen.
Hot Mike with Mick. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Thank you, sir.
You got it, guys.
All right, have a good one. There is still much more ahead here on the Hill, including our Joe Khalil live from Capitol Hill. How many more Democrats do we expect to come out against the president? Joe K on what he's hearing in the Capitol hallways. Hello from Washington, where the stakes could not be any higher. You are watching the Hill on NewsNation. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. Live look right now at Capitol Hill, where all eyes are on Democrats tonight. Will any more call on President Biden to step aside as their presidential nominee? Our Joe Khalil has been up on the Hill all day long, as he is always. They're live on the steps as members return to work. Joe, what are you hearing?
Well, we knew, Blake, that today was going to be a really critical day gauging where President Biden's support was among Democrats here on Capitol Hill. It has absolutely been that. Some calling for him explicitly to drop out of the race. You can add one more name to that list, by the way, Congressman Adam Smith. This is the top-ranking Democrat on the Armed Services Committee. This is a big fish, right? Somebody who is a senior Democrat, well-respected. He said today explicitly Joe Biden needs to suspend his campaign, and let someone else take the reins. And then you've got a number of others, by the way, who have not explicitly said that, but have expressed concerns. Over in the Senate, no Democrat so far has downright called for Biden to step aside, but you've got a lot expressing fears about where the ticket is going to be moving forward. And included in that are some Democrats who've got really tough re-election battles, like John Tester in Montana, and certainly like Sherrod Brown in Ohio. This is what Senator Brown said today to one of our affiliates.
I'm not going to judge people in my party, what they're saying or what Republicans say. I'm not a pundit. I've talked to people across Ohio. They have legitimate questions about whether the president should continue his campaign. And I'll keep listening to people.
I've talked to a lot of Democrats, many who support President Biden, but who say questions about his fitness are valid. Now, the president sent a letter to Democrats in Congress today trying to allay some of their concerns. For those who already had concerns, it did not go over very well, I can tell you, based on conversations I've had. Should mention, though, Senator Schumer and Leader Jeffries, they are firmly behind President Biden still, Blake.
So what you heard there from Sherrod Brown, Senator, who is in a very tough competitive Senate race, is distance. Right, Joe? He is trying to keep the president, for now at least, at a distance in his own race. And you got to wonder, John Tester said something similar today, if that is going to be the strategy of some or many Democrats in the halls of Congress. Joe Kay, not live for us in the Capitol hallways, on the Capitol steps, but we appreciate it. Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
All right. Meantime, the president today issued the challenge. Now, will anyone actually take him up on it? With the calls for him to bow out of the race growing from within his own party, President Biden today called into his favorite morning show and raised the idea of a brokered convention.
I'm getting so frustrated by the elites. Now, I'm not talking about you guys, but about the elites in the party who they know so much more. But any of these guys don't think I should run against me. Go ahead, announce the president. Challenge me at the convention.
Challenge me at the convention, he says. So here's how that could, in theory, work. The Democratic nominee needs 1,976 delegates to capture the nomination. President Biden, as you can see there, nearly doubled that in the Democratic primary. But as the Democratic Congressman Brad Sherman, a Democrat, member of the House, noted in a social media post, quote, counter to popular belief, the rules of the Democratic Party do not require that pledged delegates vote for Biden at the convention. Party rules require delegates' votes reflect the sentiments of those who elected them at the time the delegates cast their ballots. Chris Stirewalt, host of The Hill Sunday, echoed the congressman's comments on this show recently and said it would essentially have to go down like this.
So he has 3,894. He needs 1976. Do you think that there are 1,919 Democratic conventioneers who are delegates who are willing to say, yep, I'm doing it. I'm going to burn it down. I'm going to violate the rules. I'm going to say it's for conscience. I'm going to do it. It's possible, but it is extraordinarily unlikely.
All right, possible, extraordinarily unlikely. Sarah, is that why we heard the president today basically say, I dare you to challenge me at the convention?
It feels a little bit like an empty threat, given the political realities that were just described. I mean, for somebody to say, I'm challenging, within the Democratic Party to say, I'm challenging the sitting president, not ask questions about his fitness.
This isn't a middle school election. This is for the presidency of the United States.
I mean, that would be going out on a limb unless you had massive support behind you within the party, and clearly that doesn't exist at this moment.
Right. What did you make of that, Kelly?
His threat or dare me?
I mean, the fact, like, if I would have told anyone a year ago, you know what's going to happen? Joe Biden's going to dare people to challenge him at the convention. You all would have laughed like that, but here we are.
You know, I tweeted today, actually, it's the way he sounded in that phone call this morning was the angry Biden that I saw when I ran into him on St. Croix when I was trying to follow him ahead of the 2019.
I saw your tweet.
I was like, he was like, don't go down my driveway. That was what he sounded like on that phone. So he sounds pissed that people are telling him to back off. He truly believes that he is the only one that can defeat Trump because he did it in 2020. He thinks he could do it again, but if this time may be different.
You know what I wonder? Because in Donald Trump's White House, to a credit or a fault, a lot of people said to a fault, he would let anyone go in there, go into the Oval Office. Cabinet secretary, come on in. It was very open door policy, right? Joe Biden's the other way. He's closed, very tight inner circle. And what we saw out of the president today was calling onto his favorite morning show, vent, rail, talk about the polls, talk about the elites. Am I talking about Donald Trump or Joe Biden? In this case, I'm talking about Joe Biden, but I wonder if that was sort of a look behind the curtain of how he actually is with that very small circle.
Well, they forced him into this position, though, Blake. I mean, they're calling him. He did, but for his bad performance, we wouldn't be here. We'd be talking about the campaign. I've said that, but he feels like he's being forced out, and he may be responsible for that, but he's fighting back now. And the call into the radio show was unscripted.
Yeah.
They need to have him out and get out to show whether it's anger or whether he can go unscripted. That's the only way he's going to outrun that bad performance.
But was he unscripted? I mean, we have no idea. He was on the phone.
So the White House was asked about this.
Questions.
They say he was not. You could hear papers kind of like shuffling in the background.
And even for the parts, he quoted, he said he wasn't reading from a script.
Right, of course not. My good, you paper shuffling? Of course you got paper shuffling. I've shuffled this right here.
There were real questions about whether he was reading from a script. I'm just answering the question. Okay. There were questions about if he was reading from a script.
They have to have him out there. He's got to show he's running 2 races now. He's not only running for president, he's running to maintain his nomination.
Is this trying to out-Trump Trump, though, Ashley?
I don't know if you can do that.
Right, but that's why.
No, but you know what? I just want to make a comment. I guess it is. I think he's just fighting for his survival. But I also think if he really wanted to show that he's all there, he would have gone on the show and not called in.
Right.
So you could see it. But I do have to say, Trump is being very, very disciplined. Going into what you were talking about with Mick, I mean, on many ways, he was disciplined on the screen, on the stage. Mm-hmm. He's disciplined this week, and maybe he's
the news. Changing. So the news cycle will change because at some point Donald Trump has to unveil between now and Monday. Essentially, he has to unveil his vice presidential selection, and when that comes out, right, Donald Trump chooses fill in the blank. That will clearly change the news cycle. But before I get to Scott,
Ashley a question. I mean, what do you make of that discipline? I think we've seen these oscillations from Trump before of being. He loves to be unscripted, but then there'll be times he'll tighten up.
I think he's got a really tight campaign this time, and I think he has really good staff at the top. And I say this all the time, and his Susie Wiles, I think that she's very disciplined and makes him very disciplined.
Or they've got a muzzle on him and they've got him tied up and sitting in a chair somewhere.
But you know the fear. The big fear is that changes for Republicans and how long he can hold it. All right, a major part of the opposition to the president, the current one, by the way, is coming from the party's donors. Today, he joined a call with donors to reiterate how he says he's not dropping out and the party needs to unite behind him. Scott, you're a longtime Democratic donor. What I've noticed from you, and we've gotten to know each other over the last year, is a change in tone as it relates to the president. You are frustrated with how he has handled this. You are frustrated with how he's responded to this. You write checks. I wonder, in your world of writing checks, what you're hearing and how many more Scott Boldens out there are out there.
Well, they're all Scott Boldens out there as far as being concerned. How much of that concern is going to commit us to not writing checks anymore? Because Donald Trump is still out there. And you know, when you go to kill the king, you got to kill him, politically and otherwise. And so the factions of the Democratic Party that are coming after Joe Biden and wanting to blow it up and say we can still win this thing, but we need to make some decisions now. I don't know, call it my age, but that just seems really, really extreme at this point. But this week will be critical. Either they're going to get behind Joe Biden or they're not, but they've got to make that decision today. And as far as donors, I'm ready to continue to write checks, and I think most donors are, not all. I need to know who I'm writing a check to, though. And this week, somebody needs to tell me by Sunday of this week who I'm writing checks to.
And at the end of the day, it's follow the money.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's life.
Well, they got
that's not just politics,
million.
That's life.
They got $240 million. He can hang around as long as he wants.
And there were skeptical donors on that call, though, too, wondering how he's going to move forward from this. How is he going to get people on board? There were some that said, I would walk over glass for you. But there were others that were questioning him on that call today.
And that's his fault. That's his fault, right? He can't blame anybody else for that. But for that bad debate, we'd be talking about the campaign.
See, I just don't agree with you that it was just this debate. There were so many things. The event with Obama that he couldn't walk off
the debate confirmed what were our worst fears. And I'll say that.
And here's
I think you'll agree with that.
Here's what I would say. It was just so interesting to hear from Scott here. A staunch defender of the president. And I hear your frustration. And that's the issue and the trouble for the president and for the Democratic Party at this point.
And he better go win, too. He better go win. Because if he loses and we lose the House and Senate, oh, my God, it's going to take years.
There will be a revolt among Democrats.
No question.
That's the case. All right, coming up here on the Hill, Congress returns from their 4th of July recess. And of all the things, think about all the things that are going on right now. All the big talk. You know what they're talking about up there on the Hill? Your dishwasher. Why? We're putting that to a member of Congress. Other side of the break, your dishwasher and Congress. You're watching The Hill.
NewsNation tonight. A prop master's warning before he backed out of Alec Baldwin's movie Rust.
Yes, I did warn them. I didn't want loss of life. I didn't want someone to die.
The Hollywood insider speaking out one day before the big trial. Tonight on Banfield, only on NewsNation.
Republicans have introduced to push back on appliance standards for energy efficiency. 2 of those could be voted on at some point this week. Now, one of those bills is known as the Stop Unaffordable Dishwasher Standards Act, otherwise known as the SUDS Act. One of the sponsors of that bill is the Republican congressman from the state of New York, Anthony D'Esposito, who joins us once again here on the Hill. Congressman, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate your time, sir, as always. I was reading up on this, and the bill, here's part of what the bill does. It aims to, quote, prohibit the Secretary of Energy from prescribing or enforcing energy conservation standards for dishwashers that are not cost-effective or technologically feasible and for other purposes. Put it in non-congressional speak for me. What are you trying to do here?
I think Congressman Langworthy, my colleague from New York, put this piece of legislation forward. It's pretty simple. This is about common sense. It's about the fact that we are trying to overcome the disastrous policies that Biden and his administration, and quite frankly, not just Joe Biden, but we're seeing it in New York as well, where they keep pushing these crazy energy policies towards the consumers and towards neighbors, which is only increasing the prices of appliances and actually reducing the performance.
You know, here's one of your Democratic colleagues, because as I mentioned, there's 6 of these. The Hands Off Our Home Appliance Act, the Liberty and Laundry Act, the Clothes Dryers Reliability Act, the Refrigerator Freedom Act, and so on. Congressman Don Beyer says this is real. He basically says you're wasting your time up there. What would you say to him?
I think Congressman Beyer should focus more on the Democrats in disarray and their dealings with the Biden debate and dealing with who's going to run for president, and let us focus on common sense issues that actually matter to the people back home.
So you say he should focus on something else, but right? Can't the same be said for you guys? Like, I'm looking at the numbers here, Congressman. It says the $3 billion will be saved on utility bills over 30 years. That's $100 million a year. And there's something like 80 million dishwashers. So if we're talking about $1 or $2 a year potentially, why are you guys even spending your time on this?
Well, I think it's what's bothering people back home. When you talk to people and they hear that the government is overreaching into their kitchen, telling them what kind of appliances to use, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. There is so much more that we should be focusing on. But unfortunately, the Biden administration, the Hochul administration, they continue their overreach, whether it's here in Washington, D.C. or back home in New York State. It seems like the policies of Democrats, especially Governor Hochul, is all about overreach. She's reaching into their pockets when it comes to the congestion pricing. She's reaching into our local zoning when it comes to ancillary housing, taking away zoning rights from villages and towns. It goes on and on. Overreaching on criminal justice and cashless bail, where she continues to double down as people feel less safe in the Empire State.
I hear you, and I hear you trying to bring it back home, Congressman, but I wonder if folks are actually telling you to do this stuff here in Washington. I know you say it's what people want, but are you actually hearing?
I'm not sure it's about people telling us. It's about talking to your constituents and your neighbors. And when I'm back home and you hear people saying of all the things that's happening across the country and all the things that the president should be focused on, why is he focused on what we're using in our kitchens? And I think we're sending a clear and concise message to the administration. Take your hands off people's kitchens and this nonsense and focus on the things that are more important.
Congressman D'Esposito from New York, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Lots going on, as we've been talking about all hours, and for a week or so. We appreciate the time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Take care.
I think this is what they call a messaging bill, but you wonder, I mean, look, like, of all the things going on, this is what Congress is doing, Kelly. Or Ashley.
I mean, I don't know. It's nice to talk about dishwashers instead of the Democratic, like what's happening in Washington this week. I'd rather talk about that.
It is the overreach. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's not just about dishwashers, though, right? It is about this old fight over government overreach versus environmental regulation. It's nothing.
Remember the gas stoves, which, by the way, that was an issue a year ago, and same thing. And actually, Joe Manchin led that effort to save our gas stoves, like save the whales.
It's dishwashers. It's stoves.
But it's the government telling you what to buy. What just happened for your...
You want the government telling you what to put in your kitchen?
I don't care about my dishwasher or stove. I don't know what I want them telling me. They tell us about it already, actually.
Yeah,
they regulate it.
You don't care because you can afford it.
Oh, gosh. And so if I can't afford it, then, and so if I can't afford it, then what? Is it going to be more expensive based on Biden's energy saving? He's saving the planet. You don't want to save the planet?
So the government says that this will cost, that the new ones are basically $26 more than the old ones, and you would pay it off after the end of 4 years. So we are talking
and the government will help you pay it off, too.
A few bucks a year here and there. Just noting that. All right, speaking of...
But you have to buy a new dishwasher.
You're not forced to buy a new... The new ones have to be compliant.
This won't get me to change my party affiliation.
Okay, I'm not trying. By the way, speaking of what's going on around the country right now, the blistering heat wave across the country, so hot, it's caused nearly half the population to be under heat advisories. This week's weather in Death Valley, California, for example, expected to reach a scorching 130 degrees and could even break the world record there, or at least the local record. Yet, some tourists are taking on the heat there as a challenge. Anyone ever been to Death Valley? I've never been there.
No.
I guess the name is appropriate right now.
I don't want to go there right now.
I could see them wanting to experience it with 130 degrees.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, some of what they're experiencing right now in Death Valley. Thank you all. Still to come here from the Hill. How President Biden's interview with a Philadelphia radio station became so controversial, and now there is consequences for the host. Leland Vittert back from his vacation. On the other side of the break, you're watching the Hill. So before we say goodbye here on the Hill, here's a story that caught our eye. A Philadelphia radio station has now parted ways with a host after she admitted to asking President Biden pre-approved questions given by his campaign in an interview last week. The president of the station saying, quote, WURD radio is not a mouthpiece for the Biden or any other administration. Joining me now, back from vacation, host of On Balance, Leland Vittert. Hello. Look at what you came back to. You too.
You've had nothing happen.
Yeah,
you're slow holiday week.
And 4th of July, what went on? This is the ultimate no-no. For the audience who doesn't know, this is a no-no for the anchor, for the reporter, whatever the description is, and also for the campaign to try to get away with this.
I think that is the bigger issue, right? Which is it shows the arrogance and the entitlement of the Biden campaign and how they operate, and they feel that they can bully reporters.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, kind of like drunk driving and cheating on your wife. Never get caught on the first time.
Oh gosh, okay. If this ever happened to you or I, we wouldn't even be able to say no so fast because our teams would know, don't even bring this to us.
It has happened to you and I. People suggest questions, people ask them in advance. But again, more importantly, this is not on the host, though they shouldn't have done it.
Right.
This shows how the Biden administration not only has treated, but has been allowed to treat reporters and anchors and what they've gotten used to being able to do over the past few years.
You've got Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz coming up on the show. Looking forward to that.
Bill O'Reilly.
All right. Have a great one. We'll see you tomorrow.